Alright guys, Tom here with Green Mountain Projects, bringing you a sweet video today of a little bit of a product review and test. So my friends over at YESWELDER sent me what is underneath this box. And what we got here is the Cut 65DS plasma cutter. So let's get her open. So, first opinions looking at this thing, the packaging is great. They definitely take a lot of care into how they package, just from having, the covers on your power plug, just to protect the prongs. It was well packaged. No way it was going to get damaged in travel, unless it literally fell out of the UPS truck. It's got protective film over the display. It's got little things covering the ports, so the threads don't get damaged. But yeah, this thing is pretty sweet. It's also super compact. It's teeny. It's like, it's roughly 14.5 inches by, call it 9 tall and 6 wide. This thing is, not going to take up a whole lot of room in my shop, which is always a plus. So with this in the box, we got this. This is your accessories. Basically, it's got a nice little sticker here that tells you exactly what's in the box. There's a 10-foot ground clamp wire, a power adapter cord, 1 foot, which is the power adapter to go from 110 to this 220 plug, the gas hose, 10 foot, operator's manual, quick connect, 1/4 inch for compressed air, and your torch, the plasma torch itself. Break this thing open. This is, I guess, the gas hose. Your user's manual comes with your 1/4 inch air compressor fitting, some Teflon tape for sealing that up. Got your ground clamp. This is the wire adapter, which I already have a couple of these from just having different welders that use them. It's pretty standard, just from a welder's plug to a 110. And this is your cutting torch right here. All right, now just to show you these unpackaged, this is your, pretty standard ground lead. This is just some high pressure tubing. Got our fitting. This looks like some kind of a wrench that's meant to probably take off the consumables on these torches. And this is a little spacer you can throw on here to space off the metal so you don't touch your tip onto what you're cutting. This is your torch. Something I've always liked about YESWELDER is their torches are really nice. This one's got like a safety on it too, which is kind of cool. So you can't press the trigger unless you flip it down and do that. The other end of this, you just got your connectors, your main connector that go onto the plasma cutter itself. This is just some Teflon tape, as I mentioned, for using on the threads of the air fittings. And something that's pretty cool about this is it actually comes with a built-in air compressor filter. So in my previous non-YESWELDER plasma cutters that, I recently had one that kind of grenaded on me, it did not have this. So that is actually a real plus. I do have an inline filter on my air supply, but this is going to be added filtration, which is going to help have that cleaner air with less moisture or debris possibly in it. Also, something to note here, this is your PSI valve right here to adjust the flow. Basically, this thing, you don't want to overdo this. When you're cutting with 110 power, you're only going to use between 45 and 60 PSI. And with 220, you're going to use 60 to 90 PSI. You want to make sure you're not putting air through this greater than 90 because it's not rated for that. You could blow an airline internally in this, and you don't want to do that. But that's basically what this little warning label is saying here. That's on the regulator valve. Now, just showing you how to set up the front end here. Basically, your grounding clamp is going to go into this hole in the far right. You can see this little thing has a little point on it, which you can see the little notches down. So you just put this in, rotate it clockwise till it snugs up and kind of clicks into place. So that's tight and that's in. Next thing is your plasma torch here. This is pretty simple. You're going to want to pull off this little black cap here. There's a little red cap here. Take that off. This big black end is what's going to go here. Just put it on, screw it tight. And the next thing you're going to have is this red wire, which is going to go onto that threaded end, and then that red cap is going to go over that wire and snug it down. And lastly, you have this connector, which is pretty self-explanatory. It just goes in this hole here. There's 2 pins. So now that we have our front set up here, we're going to flip around to the back, and we're going to talk about the air supply here. So as you can see here right now, it's got this black grommet here, which is actually meant to be fed by this clear hose they supply you. So basically the clear hose would go into here where it clamps down and doesn't come out without pushing. You'd have to push the grommet in and then pull the hose out. So that's if you're going to use this to make your air connection, but we're not, because I have a standard air compressor with a normal fitting like the one supplied. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have to unscrew this, take this piece out. So you're going to take a wrench, get that piece moving. There you go. As you can see here, that has a retention device, and that's what holds in that hose. So in my case, we're going to be using this fitting here. Basically, it's just going to screw right into the back of this filter. But before you screw it in all the way, you're going to want to take that included Teflon tape, or if you have some of your own, you're going to want to wrap these threads. Make sure you're wrapping clockwise. Clockwise, then as you're turning this, it's not going to unravel the Teflon tape. Tighten this up. For anyone that doesn't know it, this cap down here actually screws off. This cap here screws off, so you can take it off to empty it, or if you need to replace the actual filter in it. That's the cup there, and then there's this filter right here that'll screw out, just like this. And make sure you don't lose this little spring if you ever take this out, and you can replace this filter. This thing's got a gasket on it so air doesn't leak, obviously, so make sure you don't lose that gasket. Now, something that's really important to note when you're using a plasma cutter in general is you want to have clean, as dry as possible air going through this. So that's what the filter helps with. Also, though, some compressors utilize like a mineral or synthetic oil that actually goes in the compressor tank itself to help lubricate the compressor. And in that case, you don't want to use one of those compressors. You want a clean, an oil-free compressor, which most of them are these days, but just to put it out there, if you have an old compressor you're planning on using, you got to make sure it's not an oil-using compressor, basically. So now we're going to get our air hooked up to this thing. Basically, you don't want to put this thing over 90 PSI. There's internal hoses and stuff you don't want to break. So, I run my air pretty strong out here. I actually have a little valve so I can adjust that down. So I'm going to crank this down to 90 PSI before I connect this up. So as you can see here, I have an inline regulator that basically you can see I'm reading 120 PSI coming off my compressor. My compressor is actually in the basement of my house, and I've piped it over to the garage. But in this case, I'm gonna, basically cut this down. You'll hear it leak the air out until it holds the PSI. It's a little too far. So we're gonna go up just a tad over 90. So in that way, I know my plasma cutter is safe. Fitting will go right onto the back. Just a note, as far as power and air requirements, it depends on how thick you're cutting. If you're cutting thicker material, you probably want to ramp your air up a little bit. But if you're running the 220 power with this plug here, you're going to run between basically the 60 and 90 PSI. And if you're running the 110 and you're using this adapter and plugging into a 110 outlet, then you're going to want to run from 45 to a high of 60 PSI. I run 220, which I recommend if you have the ability to put a 220 plug in your shop with somewhere between a 40 and a 50 amp breaker. I highly recommend it. So here's my big plug here, and basically we'll just plug this guy in right here, and let's fire it up. So you can see right now with the display on, you know, it's showing this is your PSI on this side. We're running around right between 77 and 78. Obviously you come back to your lever in the back. To adjust it, you got to pull it up, and then you can turn it either which way, which you'll watch as I turn it, the PSI will change. When you're done adjusting, just push this down until it clicks. You have your dial here for adjusting. This adjusts your output current, or if you're hitting the post flow button here in the bottom corner, you can adjust the post flow time in seconds, between 5 and 20, which is how much longer it blows air through your torch after you've released the trigger to help cool it down and clean it. When you let go, it's going to continue to spray that air for, right now it's set at 5 seconds, so that was 5 seconds wet and it kicked it off. You would want to adjust this if you're doing really thick hot cutting to be a little longer to help with cool down time. Got your 220, it'll auto read that. If you plugged into a 110, it'll say 110 and it's reading in voltage. It does have a button to adjust units, MPa versus PSI. Also something that's really cool that I haven't had on a plasma cutter before is the pilot arc. When you start it, it gives off an actual arc, just kind of like a pilot light would on a stove, to kind of get you started, so then it arcs really easy off the piece you're cutting. It'll do the pilot arc for 5 seconds and then it'll shut it off if it doesn't come into contact with something. Now that I've shown you the display and the controls of this, I do want to show you proper maintenance of your torch here. Always make sure it's off. Electrical shock and kill. As far as parts, you have this standoff ring here, which just pulls off. Then you have kind of the protective cup here. This is brass with plastic lined. I'm used to these usually being ceramic consumables. Then this is your nozzle right here, which you can see it's got the little cross pattern and it's specifically shaped like that, and it needs to be cleaned so there's proper airflow through it. Then there's a little ring thing here. This little spacer ring or something, isolator. And then you have your electrode, which it comes with this included tool where you would just put this on the electrode to use as a wrench to get it started, and then you can hand loosen it and get your new one and hand tighten it. This is very similar to an electrode that you would have for a MIG gun, except it doesn't have the hole in the center and there's no wire coming through it. It's just for helping the electricity conduct into your tip. So to put it back together, we got our electrode in, put the little bushing ring, put that nozzle in, and then we got this cup that goes on the end. And you screw that in, nice and hand tight, and then your spacer if you want it. And that's it. Now, these consumables are on Amazon. YESWELDER has an Amazon store. You can also go on YESWELDER's website and purchase more of these consumables, because you will go through them. The consumables come with all the parts I just showed you taking off of this. Go get yourself a pack of those, or a couple. I usually buy a couple packs of consumables, so I just don't have to worry about it for a pretty long time. So that's your cutting torch right there. Now, just some tips before we get into cutting and testing this thing out. As far as when you're plasma cutting, what to look for, how to do it, you basically want to kind of judge what speed you're pulling at. So if the sparks are kind of going into the cut and shooting out to the back, it's probably because you're either moving too fast across the piece or your amperage is too low. Basically, what you're going to want to do is you want to find that good speed where you're cutting all the way through uniformly. You can kind of see the way the metal cuts. There'll be ridges in it, and if the ridges are kind of doing a little kick out towards the direction you're coming from, you're going a little too fast. Also, if you're just making a puddle of molten steel, you're probably going too slow. For safety, you definitely want to wear proper safety attire. Doesn't have to be a welding mask, but a higher shade glass lens for the looking at that arc. You definitely want to wear gloves, have something with long sleeves, or else you're going to have all these burns on your arms. Let's get to test cutting this thing a little bit. All right, guys, I got a couple different things I'm going to cut. Basically, I have this rod right here, which is going to be kind of my extreme. This thing is about 1.25 inches in diameter. So we'll see if it can cut that. That's kind of more than what the specs say, but you might be able to do it. And my second thickest right here, 3/8 inch plate steel. I have another piece right here, which is 1/4. And this is some 16 gauge sheet metal right here that will cut through pretty easily. All right, so something to think about when you're doing plasma cutting is It's not going to just cut through anything. Yes, if you have higher amperage running, it'll cut through a little bit more of rust and crud. You're going to want to grind where you're going to be cutting so that it is a better arc and you can make a better cut. Take your ground clamp, make sure you got that thing clamped onto something that can actually conduct through. Now let's get our smiley face, put that aside, because we're going to ramp this up to our 1/4 inch steel. Cut through that like it was nothing. And you can see this is what I'm kind of talking about. The streaks that you get, and you can see those streaks are all perfectly almost straight up and down vertical, which means that my pull speed is good, my amperage is perfect, and it's cutting very, very clean. You can see there's a little slag, you just grind that off on the bottom side. That's always very normal. So now we have our 3/8, which this stuff's a little dirty, so it should be kind of a good test here. You can see here the streaks are still very straight, which is great. This is 3/8, that's some pretty decent thickness right there. Now before I move up in thickness, I do want to give a demonstration of what I meant by when you're moving too fast. And so instead of the sparks going straight down through the piece, they're going to shoot off towards the direction you're coming from. So what I'm going to do now is I want to bump it up to 5/8, which I don't have anything that's 5/8 on hand with me. So I'm going to take this piece of 3/8 and this piece of 1/4, and I'm going to clamp them together with my ground clamp, and we are going to cut through both of them together, pretending it's a piece of 5/8. We did it. See right there, we went through both of these. You know, the lines are a little slanted, but not really that bad at all. It cut it like a champ, and I didn't even feel like I had to pull it that slow. So very impressive. We're already up at 5/8, which I think that's what the specs of this thing say is the max. Now, lo and behold, we have our 1.25 inch. I would say we've met our match with the 1.25 inch, which is ridiculously thick, and you would want a bigger, much heavier duty plasma cutter if you're cutting this on a regular basis. But, you know, I just kind of went back and forth a little bit, and I got, I would say, a little over 3/4 of an inch of the way through this thing, which is, you know, 3/4 of an inch is nothing to shake a stick at. That's pretty impressive, I'm not gonna lie. It's not pretty, but it went through pretty damn far. I'm finishing this thing off. So close. We did it. It's not pretty, but we did it. If you just needed to cut something quick, you could do it with something much thicker than what this thing's rated for. Alright guys, that sums up my video here highlighting this Cut 65 DS plasma cutter by YESWELDER. And let me tell you, you might as well be called Yes Plasma Cutter because this thing is freaking sick. I love it. I got another welder by YESWELDER that I actually have a video on my channel. Go check it out. It's for their 205 DS MIG. It's actually a multi-process, so it also does lift, TIG, and stick. I mainly use the MIG component. I've been using it for almost 2 years, and the thing just keeps chugging. It actually outwelds my Lincoln 140 I used to have that I got rid of because I don't need it. Like I said, go get yourself one of these. This thing cuts great. It won't break the bank. Well constructed. It's got really easy controls and display. You know, all the components are very well made, like this torch here. You can get the consumables right on Amazon. You run out, you get it in 2 days. I'm also an ambassador for YESWELDER, so if you go down to the description, get my coupon code or hit the link, go to YESWELDER's website, put in my coupon code GMP. They'll cut a little bit of money off the top because they know I sent you. And hey, you'll get this affordable plasma cutter for even a better price. So no brainer, go do it. Stay tuned for more videos like these. Thanks for watching.